Netflix, Paramount, Stars, you name it, you're paying over $100 for streaming. And what happens on level because people will be leading to the streaming options too.
Rahib, hi.
You did?
I'm good, man. How are you? Good. Sorry, just little crisis management.
Why won't you be doing the right
Hello. Right. चलो बाद में देखेंगे चलो
Hello. Hi. Can I request all of you to please take your seats? Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thanks to each one of you for coming down all the way in such hot summer. My warm welcome to all the esteemed panel members for this evening and to all the guests who are here at the 9th episode of Tech Tuesdays UK. For some of you who are attending Tech Tuesday for the very first time, Tech Tuesdays UK stands for the very idea of building a community that ideates, nurtures, and that fosters a free-flow discussion of disruptive technologies, which have the potential to impact 1 billion lives. As most of you would know, that Tech Tuesdays UK is a monthly event which takes place on the first Tuesday of every month, where we spend about an hour and a half having conversations around technology. And what you'll also realize for the people who are coming here for the first time, that the most unique thing about Tech Tuesdays UK is that this is a free-flow discussion where we don't have any given script, given set of questions, any moderation, or an agenda. Moving on, this event obviously would not have happened without the active support of our partner, Karen Gels, who are giving us the space, the tea, the coffee, and the drinks, which is going to be served after 8:30. So till then, please hang around. We believe in the power of social media because we don't have marketing budget. So we probably want each one of you to spread the good word around. During the event, as well as after the event, we have the Twitter handle, which is X now, and LinkedIn and everything around. Tech Tuesday UK is the hash word. Please use that to communicate, to promote, to talk about it. After the event, we will invite some of you to sort of give us some video bites. And we have 3 wonderful volunteers out here. We have Shubh, we have Rajuta, and we have Lena. They're going to be sort of helping you in those video bites. And for the records, all these video bites will be shared across all our digital channels. So kindly ensure that you hang around out here during the drink session. As you may be aware that every episode of Tech Tuesdays is built on a particular topic. And the topic for today's evening is sports, media, and technology. It's a wonderful piece of topic for the simple reason we talk about action, we talk about media, and we also talk about the convergence of all 3. And to drive the discussion today, I've got some very 4 good friends of mine who are going to be sitting in the panel. Let me take the pleasure of inviting each one of them. Can I have a round of applause, please? We have Alok Chitre, who is the Chief Business Officer of Royal Sports Group. For most of you who don't know Royal Sports, you probably know Rajasthan Royals. That's Alok for you. Alok, please. I have Devashri Pandit, who's the Senior Vice President at Sky. Devashri. I have Dhaval Ponda, who is the Global Head of Media Entertainment at Tata Communication. Dhaval, please take a seat. And last but not the least, we thought let's get some action from the field as well. So we've got Jeremy Snape. Jeremy is the ex-member of English cricket team. Jeremy, what you? So welcome all of you, and it's your responsibility to write this. All the best.
I've got a question first for you about Rajasthan Royals. I'd love to know. I was very fortunate. It went very quiet. I was very fortunate after my playing career for 19 years. I did a master's degree in sports psychology and then started to work with some of the elite sports teams. My first job was to be a mentor and assistant coach to the legendary Shane Warne with the Rajasthan Royals. So I flew out into Jaipur to meet my captain and coach. And we managed to win the first IPL, which is an incredible fairy tale for those of you that follow cricket. I'm sure many do. So I'm fascinated to see how you've moved from 2008 as the cheapest team in the Indian Premier League. I think $67 million was the price tag. It's worth a lot more now. But I'm fascinated to hear how over those 15 years you've grown into this global franchise and really got a global footprint.
Great, thanks. And that was not set up okay. This is actually a good question you just started. So I think if you go back to the vision, if you go back to the vision of the Rajasthan Royals or the World Sports Group as we exist today, I think the main purpose of the team exists wherein we want to drive transformation in the society through cricket, and we want to drive transformation in cricket through innovation. So if you look at the journey of the last 16 years, we've sort of stayed true to both these things. And from a community perspective, there's a whole lot of things that you've seen, right from the IPL being a great scouting platform for national, international players that have emerged. But I think the bit that I want to really touch upon today is the innovation and the technology angle and how that has really sort of seen the transformation happen. So Rajasthan Royals takes great pride in being at the forefront and the cutting edge of innovation. We like to call ourselves the Moneyball team, wherein we really go out with data. And even when we look at our sort of data and our technology strategy on the commercial and the business side, we look at it, we've got a nice little framework called DICE, wherein we focus on the 4 elements of D for data, I for insights, C for content, and E for experiences. And within that framework of DICE, we've sort of really built elements of data which impacts not just on-field performance, but what can we do with fans off-field. In terms of insights, again, not just insights that we get from players in terms of their health statistics, their performance statistics, but how can we create a more intimate relationship with our fans. Content, I mean, the whole element of whether we build, buy, or rent from an OTT and a streaming perspective, and experiences right from offline experiences which help you connect digitally to the new age of the Web3 and the metaverses. So that's really something that we've gone very hard on, very deep into over the years. And we want to continue to be that team, which I would say the cheapest team, but the most well-optimized team, wherein we're really putting our money where our mouth is and using our funds really well. And fortunately, we've got a great team together. Now we've got 3 teams, one in Rajasthan, which is the Rajasthan Royals, one in Barbados, with the Barbados Royals. We've got 2 teams there. There's a women's team, which actually played 3 games, and they won all 3 so far in the last couple of days. So we're playing the finals shortly. And the 3rd team that we have is in South Africa. So we've really come a long way. And thanks to you that you were some of the early day pioneers who've made all of this happen.
I'll look forward to my week in Barbados as a thank you for that.
I'd love to do that. I've already invited you to South Africa.
Sounds great. Maybe I can just chair this part of the discussion, but from a Sky's perspective, then perhaps we can look at it from a technology perspective. We've talked about this 15-year development from a playing and a talent perspective. What has Sky been doing, do you think, to maximize technology in sport?
Right. So as far as Sky is concerned, I think we woke up a bit late to the IPL because we didn't have the rights for it initially, and for us as Sky, it's always been the UK, which has been our focus market. So we did take the rights to the IPL a couple of years back, but the problem is that the inflation and the cost of acquiring the rights for the IPL probably makes sense if you're a broadcaster based out of India. But for us, it doesn't make sense to pay beyond a certain price to just acquire the rights for vanity purposes. So we've got to be very efficient and sensible of the money that we are spending on. But if we were to draw a parallel of the IPL to back here, the 100, that's a collaboration that we are doing with the ECD. We are working closely with the BBC, and we are trying to grow participation of the game in the sense that we can try and bring people together as a community, because we realize that as far as cricket is concerned, and this was working during brainstorming sessions with the officials from the 100 and ECD, where we figured out that sports, especially cricket, is not looked at as a family entertaining unit, unlike in India. And this is one of the things that when I have a commercial hat on, it's very difficult to explain to people that the way football is followed here, which is pretty much a male bastion sport, cricket isn't. Because for cricket, especially from the South Asian perspective, it's more of a generational thing. You know, you've got the grandparents, you've got the parents, you've got the kids, the grandchildren, everybody watching it in unison. That's not the case in football. So it's very difficult for anybody who doesn't understand that to relate with it. So the 100 is a great example of what we are trying to do, both on ground as well as through our broadcasting of rights that we do have for. And IPL is also interesting because now we are, we sub-license the rights from the actual right holders, but it's all a question of whether it makes economic sense for us to indulge in anything which can be true heartbreaking, or do we just show the games as it happens? And fortunately, I can say that unlike broadcasters in India, where sometimes it becomes a 5-ball over because they want so much of airtime that they are sold, for us, we show the waterway, the room. So it's a far more pleasurable viewing experience as far as the IPL is concerned for us. So that's where we are. And Tata, obviously, you're doing a great job in bringing it to the global arena. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I think great to be here. So I think sports and business is strange. I don't think people maybe start with, I want to have a career in sport. I think most people that we've met and the personal experiences are people stumble into it. So when we started as starters, we were looking at media entertainment and live sports to get into it. We were looking at how the industry is shifting, and Netflix was still doing DVDs, and that was their core business. And one day they shifted the commercial model, and they said, now onwards, we will charge $5 a month for people to watch something on a computer. And the markets actually punished them. The stock tanked 40%. And the CEO came out and apologized for it and said, look, the only thing we apologize for is how we have communicated this, but we stand by this. And this is the future. And I remember this because we had included this as a short note in terms of a very short 2-page strategy paper in terms of what is going to happen. And all of this is quite recent history. Like if you look at from when moving pictures started 120 years ago, this is just like last 6 to 7 years, right? And if you look at it, this is a simple daily habit across the world, like wherever you are in the world, whatever economic strata you're from, whatever your social background is, people's daily habits have changed fundamentally. People consume content like there is no tomorrow. And we look at, we support a lot of, most of live sports streaming and production globally. So we have the sort of benefit of looking at a lot of underlying data and research that goes into it. On an average, people consume 60 hours of content every week. It's more than 8 hours per day. on an average, right? And if you can imagine that, a working day used to be 8 hours, right? And now you have people consuming content for more than 8 hours. So on one hand, this is something or a very simple fact that is driving the whole industry. What it means is if you need to consume 8 hours of content a day, you need more content. And because you've got multiple family members, you've got households, you need different types of content, right? And all of us can relate to it. I mean, fortunately, this is not I mean, we are working in an industry where everyone can relate to it. And from a business standpoint, everyone has an opinion as well, which is always not great. But so you have a demand for content that is just staggering, and people consume. And we look at data, and people in China will consume Colombian live football matches at 3 o'clock their time without subtitles and without an audio language, and it just goes on and on. So I think that simple fact that we are very lucky to be in an industry where we're part of this, where which is touching almost all of our daily lives. And technology actually is playing such an important role because the way you produce content, the way you consume it. I think nowadays all of us are used to you open Netflix or an app and you're just used to it working. We are not used to having a black screen anymore. We are getting used to high quality of content. So I think from that standpoint, this industry has taken a dramatic sort of shift towards the future. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, the whole industry, the next generation when they consume content, and we have a room full of individuals talking about media entertainment, it will be completely different. They will wonder why we have such a boxes. What are these satellite dishes doing? Why would you need that? And why is my content not personalized to me as an 8-year-old? So why is this content not customized to every single age group, every single geography? And that is the future. And I think this simple sort of trend, micro trend at a global level is something that is driving, I mean, such brilliant things across every country and every industry in sort of media entertainment. Yeah.
I actually have a follow-up question from what you just said. Is I think, and I'm keen to understand your perspective and anyone else in the audience as well who has a point of view on that. Is how do you see the mix of live versus non-live content? See, because live content is something which is controlled by the leagues, by the boards, ICCs, BCCIs of the world. As a rights holder, as a owner of a team, a member of a team management person, there is a huge opportunity for creating non-live content. How do you see that consumption, and what other ways? Of course, one is through streaming platforms, but what other personalized ways do you think that will shift from where we are today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we grapple with it almost every single day in terms of how do we invest. I think generally people have so many different ways to consume content now, and there are so many different platforms. There's a certain fatigue in terms of the number of apps that people can have on their phone and can physically consume, right? And then so that is sort of a globally it has now been established. People will have probably 5 apps, 3 video and 2 audio apps subscriptions. Maybe they will have 1 or 2 free apps that would be, and this is established. 5 is the cutoff, right? And within that, what we have seen is at the end of the day, platforms need to be paid. So as Sky, you need subscribers to pay. You have some subscriptions. As you need more broadcasters to pick up your content and show it. I think the only thing commercially that will move and incentivize people to get subscription is live sports. So we still see that the demand for live sports and live content, even for reality shows which are not technically live, but people will consume that. And that is the main driver for people to either belong to a platform. And on the non-live side, there are 1 or 2 leaders. And typically there's one or, I mean, you have 1 or 2 companies at a global level. And then in every country you have 1 or 2 local leaders. Right, so you will have the BBC out
Watch on this YouTube.
supported version, US differently. So non-live is still very important, and I think as a content owner, you have such great live sort of content out there. I think what people are looking for and is not yet available is fan engagement. So if I'm a super fan of Rajasthan Royals, I would love to understand player stories, background. People want to know how do the players train actually? What is their exercise regimen? What is their nutrition regimen? And that is something that people will sort of pay as a digital subscription to be part of that Rajasthan Royals sort of narrative. Yeah, and Devesh, Sky, yeah, what's your
No, I think it has always been the case. So that's why you've got things like, Manchester United TV and Liverpool TV and all that kind of stuff where it's catering to the super fans. And as far as we at Sky are concerned, you're right, because in terms of streaming, the reason why these streaming companies became famous was it was access to global content without the bother or headache of rights. Now, compared to the legacy entertainment companies, because whenever, for example, if Netflix had a show, whatever show it is, they had the global rights to that particular show, so they could show it in any part of the world. And that's the biggest advantage that they had, unlike other, legacy broadcasters where the rights were carved out according to various regions. And that was one of the reasons why all these companies became hugely successful. But there comes a point that the funding was done through the era of cheap money, venture capitalists, blah, blah, blah. But now with the interest rates as they are, everybody's realized that, you can't sustain that. That's not a model that you can sustain. And as you said, maximum 3 or 4 streaming platforms you'd be subscribing to. But if you were to subscribe to the top 4 or 5, you'd still be shelling out about 70, 80 pounds per month. And if you were to pay for the broadband, it's over 150 pounds, which brings you to that same equation as to whether you're better off 5 years back with having a Sky subscription that gave you access to all that content. Because, and that's one of the things that, the corrective stuff that is happening. So through Sky, what we have done is we've got Netflix free, if you've got the basic package. So Netflix is part of it. If you've got Sky Cinema, you've got Paramount Plus as part of the package. So we are trying our best to adapt ourselves to the consumer, especially with the cost of living crisis and so on and so forth, how best value we can give to somebody. And speaking about the global rights to sports, it's interesting. I don't think Apple can very well go to an ICC and say, we'll take the whole global rights. They're not doing it. There's a reason for them not doing it. Because there's no point of acquiring global rights for vanity purposes and showing it. But what Netflix is doing smartly is they're investing in programs like Drive to Survive, which has got the whole Formula One behind the scene sort of a thing, Breakpoint, because they don't have to worry about this. And sporting, boards are also aware that sports is the one thing which sports and news. These are the two things that you cannot have that same level of excitement on a catch-up basis compared to any other content, right? And everybody knows that. But news is not a single news organization that is profitable unless you're an exception. And sports. But there's a cost to the rights. So, for example, the recent IPL, the rights that got sold, it was a huge fight between Disney, Star, and Jio Viacom. Now, who's the eventual winner? BCCI clearly. But in terms of the revenue, that's why Star is under pressure, because the average revenue per user from a Disney Star is what, 59 cents compared to a Disney Plus subscriber where the average revenue is $6.92. It's like 10 times more. But you have to wake up and smell the coffee, whether you just want to acquire the rights for acquiring it, or you're going to create something interesting which binds people together so that they are able to enjoy it and at the same time not break the bank.
I will link question to Jeremy. Before you ask me one more question, I've got a question for you. And I love how the conversation's about IPL. I'm loving it. but I think, Jeremy, you sit at a very interesting niche of content, where you're actually monetizing content which is through interviews and your whole background in sports psychology. How are you using that with brands and with corporates. I mean, I think that's a very different perspective, right? So it's not live content, it's not regular shoulder content.
Yeah, it's a fascination, really. I through my playing career, I think, bowling at Sachin Tendulkar at Eden Gardens was a very different experience in front of 120,000 people compared to Leicestershire, where I was playing at the time in county cricket. So for me, the step up to international was all about mindset. I've got the same strategies, I've got the same technique, but sometimes I failed on the big stage because I didn't believe that I deserved to do well. And it was interesting to me that no one had ever really spoken about that or coached that. So I did my master's degree and then started to work with the elite teams, and I started to get very close to England rugby, Premier League soccer, the likes of the IPL, South Africa, some of these great players. And I was working with them, understanding their insecurities and how teams gel and how they break apart. And then I was starting to work with corporate brands that were saying, how do we build a strong team through this transformation? And they're actually the same, because it's human mindset, human culture, interaction, social chemistry, all of this. So my proposition was really a fascination of my own to find out, like my podcast name, go inside the mind of champions and understand, interview them. How do you think when you perform? Olympians, best-selling authors, what have you learned? Neuroscientists, interview them, and then put them into a Netflix-style platform, and then do that as part of my keynote speaking or as a subscription revenue into the corporate partners. So, for example, if you're trying to lead a change initiative, understanding the mindset of change and how to communicate change and how to inspire people and how to build teams, all those component building blocks are in the world of high performance, whether it's Cirque du Soleil, Formula One, or an IPL team. So by videoing that and capturing it and coding it, we've been able to create that digital library. The really interesting thing for me, trying to scale the business now, having filmed 120 experts, is the pricing strategy. We were talking earlier about a lot of the technology platforms have been funded by venture capital, which allows them to almost run at a loss for 8 to 10 years. And then through that very low price point, they get mass scale, and then they start to, put the prices up, and that's where they start to make money. I couldn't afford to do that, trying to make that transition out of the sporting career. So it's been self-funded. But what we're starting to do now with our bigger corporate plans is start to see how people are using it. But back to your point about consumption, I think the average, we've got about 120 experts in our library, about an hour's footage on each one. We've broken everything down into 90-second or 2-minute videos, and everyone's got a little strategy about how business can use it. And our average time on the platform is about just over 5 minutes. And it's a really interesting thing that can we build habit? Now, we're like Pavlov's dog, aren't we? Going to our phone. We'd never have any downtime. And as soon as there's an awkward pause in a panel debate, or we're waiting for the bus or the train or whatever, the phone's out, and we're consuming it 8 hours. We are consuming 8 hours of content. So this ability to create a habit that is useful, insightful, thought-provoking, leadership development or personal development or mental health development or well-being development, instead of cat videos or more, IPL old footage. That's the bit that I'm really interested in. But that whole behavioral change and habit forming usually needs to be paired to something. So for me, it might be a coffee break with a thought leader each day and people go to it, or it might be a Monday morning insight that we push out. So we're trying to create a habit in people's schedule for personal development. Whereas I think the interesting part of your debate is we've got the live events that punctuate the week. So we've got the Premier League soccer on the Saturday, and the emotional sort of ride through the week is who's going to be in the team, are there any injuries? We build up, who's the team that's been picked? Then the live show comes on and we all watch that. And then there's the debrief. I can't believe the referee did that. I can't believe we've lost to them again. Can't believe we're here in the league. And that wanes again through the week. And then there's more stimulus content. We build up again. So I guess the live sort of cadence gives us that rhythm in sport. The bit that I'm really interested in, which is I'm going to throw it straight back to you, is I listened to a podcast earlier, which is it's called Business Breakdowns, and one of them was on the business of football, and they were comparing and contrasting. I think it was Nintendo as a sort of games hardware. Their lifetime revenue per customer was about £1,200 or $1,200 because you've got to buy the kit, and then you buy some upgrades, and it's a pretty lump sum up front. And then they were comparing it with Man United, 1 billion global fans. Maybe there are some in the room. But the average lifetime revenue was about 50 cents. It's an incredible disparity because you've got millions and millions of consumers of content, but they're dispersed around the world. And very, very few of them are going to Old Trafford to watch the game and never will. So I guess I'm interested in the wider technological disruption of things like augmented reality, virtual reality. What kind of ways can we engage this global audience for incremental revenue outside of the games and the competition, so that we don't rely, on the broadcasters for the live events? Are there any fan experiences that you can give to pay £4 and you get to see the team selected or into the auction or anything like that?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that question. Again, this was not planted, but we actually piloted a membership program at the start of last season, with which we've had a good amount of success. So the idea, and just for the understanding of the larger audience here, is today most of the teams are dependent on 3 or 4 sources of broad revenue. One is the media rights, second bit is sponsorships, third bit is ticketing, and the fourth bit is licensing and merchandising. Okay, and outside of this, in the last 15 years, in general, the direct-to-consumer industry has evolved quite a lot, across the globe. And I think that's where the big opportunity now lies, because the other opportunities that I just spoke of, except for the ticketing bit, where also there's a big B2B play, like the Ticketmasters of the world do the Book My Shows in countries like India, there's a big B2B play. Where does a direct-to-fan play? And that's where a membership program potentially comes into the picture. The idea is to create money can't buy experiences. How can we get a small cohort of fans to get on a Zoom call with the captain of our team? How can we get them behind the scenes in a net practice when the team is practicing just before the matches are about to happen? So these are some of the money can't buy experiences directly to the fans. In a way, we've tried this on our own. Then we've also got partners, and I think while it's there's a slump right now, which is the Web3 and the metaverse element, personally, I'm very, very bullish of what it has as a potential to offer, from soft ownership of player cards as NFTs to fan tokens, which a lot of football teams have done successfully. They give you the ability to sort of, okay, what would the training kit of a team look like? You've got 4 options. Now you've got actually an ability to vote. It's like holding a share of a company that you've invested in. It's like those kind of experiences, which we will potentially see scale. Now, where there is still a big technology gap there. And there are a lot of companies that I speak with, we're dealing with all the time, who do talk about creating fan experiences, but nobody really has managed to create a solution which covers the entire value chain. They're still very piecemeal. So me as a person who's a user, like the B2B user, not necessarily the end user, still hasn't been given access to a solution which takes care right from everything from the start to finish. And what that pushes us to do is then just go to somebody like a fan code and just give them the entire, like our shop, our merchandise store is managed end-to-end by fan code. So right from the deliveries to the e-commerce part, to the payments, to the refund, everything is managed end-to-end by them, because otherwise I have to sort of assemble that entire value chain. So somebody, if that solution is available, I'm pretty sure that teams would be willing to take that on board. I've been speaking to a lot of football teams in the last couple of weeks that I've been here. And Premier League teams also have kind of sort of found a balance. Some of them have a hybrid model, but none of them have said that, okay, we take full charge of the entire D2C ecosystem and we'll manage everything end to end. They do need support from external B2B players. So I think the ecosystem also needs to kind of rise up the way an Amazon is today. I mean, could there be an Amazon of equivalent of for sports teams, when we just have a central place where you could just go and buy anything that you want for any sports team in the world? I think we would love to have something like that. So
Fanatics is something.
again, I mean, they don't have a global presence. You know, it's like, so there are like Fanatics has fan code is trying to do something similar. So it's still, as I said, sort of piecemeal kind of approach, wherein you have to go and figure out bits and pieces. There's one player who's trying to sell player NFTs. There's another player who's trying to sell a mobile game. Another player who's trying to sell a console game. So we are still dealing with these 4, 5, 6 different entities. The more the consolidation, I would say, the better it is. And because one of the things that teams have started investing in the last, I would say, decade is CRM and marketing automation technologies, because the teams want more and more intimate understanding of their fans, not just where they come from, which social media fan following can give you an understanding of, but their ability to buy. What do they spend most amount of time in? What do they like? What are their interests, behaviors? Have they purchased tickets? Have they purchased merchandise? Again, something that we've started investing in the last 2 years has been a decent amount of success for us so far, but still a long way to go. Yeah, I think there's a
So I'm Behrood from Microsoft. I don't want to pitch over here, but there's a very interesting question on fan experience over here. And there is a trend that we are seeing, especially in India right now. And I just want to share that because that kind of touches all the points that you've been talking about. One of the very interesting trend that has happened is Microsoft, the consumer business, owns Xbox, which is the gaming ecosystem. We have the gamification engine that supports ecosystems like Minecraft and all these big and Roblox now, right? A lot of media and entertainment companies, especially sports companies, has come to us and asked, can we take the gamification concepts and learn lesson of there and apply into sports industry? And we are working with very top brands in India and overseas over here on different sports, where we're saying, we don't provide the physical value chain, but from the digital platform point of view, whether it's the CRM, whether it's the hook into NFTs, whether it's the microtransaction, which is the name of the game, of the post-live content. So you were talking about the pre-event, in-event, and post-event. There is a lot of monetization techniques that has emerged, and the numbers that we are seeing is incredible in terms of, not for us, but for the customers that they're making revenue out of these new emerging trends. So touching on the metaverse and the merchandise over there, there is a lot of insights that we have created as part of the media and entertainment. Happy to share that. But coming back to the trends that you're talking about, you're spot on. There is a whole part of the rights acquisition and how do you create that. But what companies are doing right now, and the brands like IPL, they're using their brand without acquisition of rights. How can you monetize the fan experience? So you're reducing the barriers of rights acquisition, because if match is happening, the fans are still engaging. They don't have to engage while watching the match. There are other techniques at the back of gamification that they're using right now. And it's a very interesting insight. And the most amount of, if I put the heat map on the planet, it is coming in India right now, especially at the back of IPL. So I just wanted to say that there is a whole business that we are doing in Microsoft on the gamification. How do you bring the game industry into sports entertainment? And that's a very emerging trend.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. And I think gamification is becoming, historically, sort of, when you say games, people think of a console, somebody playing a game and sort of spinning out doing that. But it has evolved now. I think even for an extremely popular platform called Roblox, more relevant to some very young sort of audiences, the most popular game over there would be just people buying pets or things for their pets, digital pets, mind you. And
Yes.
they earn about $500 million just for people buying pets. But the gamification has now become a habit. So, for example, there are e-commerce companies who are using gamification for e-commerce shopping platforms. I think in the UK now you've got something called Temu, which is very popular, and we sort of scoff at them, but these are multi-billion-dollar sort of valued organizations that are now posing a real threat to an Amazon e-commerce side of things. So gamification is, on one hand, it improves the engagement side of things, which is important because you want people.
The more you stay on the app, the more money you want. It's very simple concept.
And then you come to the money side of things.
Exactly.
One is my habit. I enjoy interacting with somebody, so it's two-way. And then you come to the betting side of things and the money side of things, where people get placing a bet, I think, is considered old school, but you have fantasy sports as well. And you have so many examples where you've got regulated markets like UK and Europe are extremely well regulated. I would say legal protections in place, and that's why you would have far more sort of insight into this. But also in unregulated markets, where the US is now beginning to legalize betting, but until now they used to have fantasy sports as a way of people to participate and engage. But again, all it is doing is people want something where they can engage with an event that is happening. It could be as simple as I've picked up a fantasy team and how well is my team doing, and I will discuss it with sort of my sort of friends as well. And these are industries, I would say, from the outside in, they look quite dull and grey. But these are industries which are massive. There are few players who have probably cornered the entire market, and they're substantial. And we don't really sort of hear of them as much. But this is something which is actually taking place quite actively.
So just one point, and to Vaibhav's point, I think what you're saying is correct, and I would love to sort of speak with you on this later on. But what brands and companies like Microsoft should sort of do for teams like us is really help understand the teams on how do we really create a meaningful value exchange. Yeah, for most teams today, just fans spending. Engagement is not necessarily currency. Yeah, engagement is social currency, but engagement is not necessarily revenue. I think how do you create that journey from engagement to monetization? What are some of the offerings that we can create? And I'll take an example of the Royals in this case. So there are 3 or 4 things, let's say, that we sell. So we sell tickets, but they're sold by our ticketing partner. We sell digital collectibles, but they're sold by another partner. We sell merchandise, but they're sold by another partner. Now, these 3 different ecosystems, how do we sort of really bring this together? Yeah, and sort of create a more cohesive engagement strategy. Yes, there is gamification. We do gamification where we've got sort of more casual games just to make sure that people spend a lot more time on our app and the web. We offer them loyalty points for which they can redeem it for something else. It could be ABC, XYZ experiences. But we really need companies like Microsoft to sort of come in and say that, okay, these are the things that you do. And let me tell you, I mean, last week, one of the Premier League clubs that I was speaking to, they're really sort of trying to figure out their Web3 strategy. Nobody's really figured it out fully yet. Yeah, it just started happening in 2021. In fact, I was just reading a book. The book's called NFTs are a scam and NFTs are a future. Okay, so the author also is sitting on the fence. He's saying the book is titled both. They are the future, they are a scam. So I think most people, there are a few people who've taken sides, but most people are still sitting on the fence trying to figure that out. So I'd love to hear later on maybe what you've
Sure.
on.
So I think you're leaning on the concept of the marketplace and user exchangeable area and how do you provide the end-to-end connectivity on.
I'm just leaning, help me make money. Yeah, I'm just leaning on that. So you show me a way and we'll go whatever way it takes us.
Ask another question. We're talking there about monetization, which is all good. I think another key part and another massive transformation is data. You dropped in a few stats. From a playing perspective, I think it's fascinating. We see Lionel Messi, there might be a heat map of all the passes that he's made during a game. I'm interested in who owns that data, because the betting companies are saying that if he does 26 assists in a match, then they can make money off that. But surely as an artist, that's his data because it's his footprints, it's his passes. So that's one thing. And then back from a performance and broadcast perspective, with wearable technologies and the advances we've seen, could we start to see in this next era the lactate levels or the lactic acid levels of a triathlete that's coming to the end of a marathon stage, or the heart rate of a batsman? You wouldn't want to see mine facing Brett Lee in Australia, by the way, but now I've retired, I'm very happy for heart rates to come up on the screen, but you can almost see that kind of biometric data coming into the feed. And again, that's giving you a new fascinating dimension onto what's going on with the athletes. I don't know if there's anything else, in terms of, if data is the new oil, then, what are they into?
Data is a new oil. I mean, it is the reason why we see companies like Amazon, Google, and Apple to an extent getting into the whole content game. Because if you can understand daily viewing habits, what people's preferences are, and Amazon has already started doing this, they are actually placing content, and then you can buy like you can see on that particular screen through the same app, right? So that is the power of data, because viewing, I mean, yes, people will pay $5, £5 a month to view something, but if you can capture the shopping and the whole e-commerce spend from every household, that is worth 20, 30, 40 times when it comes to sort of monetization. So data, again, I think legally people are now moving to protect data that they have, or protect data that they classify as personal data. But there are organizations, again, that can own data for a particular event, for a particular, let's say, group of professionals, and it is their data. So, and I mean, it's interesting you talk about heart rates and all that. So I think that has already started sort of showing up. So you can now, for some sports, you can see if there's a driver, you can see the heart rate of that particular driver when the driver is taking a turn in some of the rallies and some of the other sort of racing championships. And people are engaging with it because they're forming strategies and using it when it comes to sort of sports like that. So I think, yeah, I mean, data is becoming extremely important. And going forward, you will have far more layers of sort of information that will be available. A lot of it will be sort of casual consumption. Like, yeah, if I follow a sport, I would love to consume the data associated with it. But most of it will also be monetized, right? And I think this sort of follow-up question for you, Jeremy, is that on your platform, how do people find content? And what is the most popular sort of content piece that sort of come up? And I'm sure there must be sort of some surprises that you would have felt that, oh, okay, people are actually engaging with this far more than some other things.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So we've interviewed about 120 people, about 50 or 60 are from elite sports. So people like Gareth Southgate, Mo Farah, Eddie Jones, Viv Richards. And then we've also got ballerinas, Cirque du Soleil, neuroscientists, Harvard professors. And I think the interesting thing that I've seen is that people come in for the big sports names and then end up watching neuroscience. So I think that says something about perhaps our insecurities, that we want to be big and strong and look at the heroic sports stories, but then actually what's going on in my head, so there's something really interesting about that blend of again, pull content, but then watching people with their interests, especially over an organization. And again, from our perspective as a small business, trying to create some kind of flagging system that, yes, we might have one department of a multinational everyone's looking at innovation and creativity and brainstorming content, but then equally another division in another city might be looking at burnout, stress, mental health. And that allows us then to flag to that HR director that there might be an issue in this particular department. And they say, yes, we know that leader's creating a toxic environment. We need to do something about it. So both in terms of insight and pulling the data, but also some warning signs, especially around, mental health and burnout. I think it's a really interesting, observation.
I think there was a comment from the back there.
Hi, see, I'm from Excel Technologies. We're partnered with Microsoft and are especially addressing Alok's your point that how a technology company can help businesses like yours. So some of the credentials we include, we are the mobile first partner for Manu. We have been the first partner for the State of Australia. We are the first partner for thank you. For MetLife Stadium. So there are many things what we are delivering. But coming to the point in terms of how you will monetize, you increase in terms of the revenue coming from it. One is definitely the engagement, where you're bringing lot many fans on your platform through gamification, from player statistics. But monetizing is actually when you're getting money into your bank account. Okay, and largely what we have seen, if you're offering a very seamless checkout experience, that brings the value. Customer can be, or fan can be there on your platform, can be there in terms of coming, seeing the statistics, going through gamification, going through the previous videos. But when they come to buy anything and if you don't give the checkout experience seamlessly, it just goes off. Okay, and that's where, just from credentials, if we see, Man U had almost 650 million untapped fans. Okay, and you can understand in terms of fans from the geographies around. Okay, and we managed to bring back at least 50% of that onto the platform. It is about engagement. It is about the checkout experience. It is about the embedded, you can say the financial experience which you can provide. Maybe we can discuss more later.
No, definitely. I mean, my question would be, can you bring half of those 650 million fans to me? Yeah, I'll be happy with that.
Create more content around it.
Yeah, but just to address that, I'll tell you something. It's not that we've not experimented. I think we are very sort of experimental as an organization, where every season we are trying to run new experiments. I think the trade-off is that, is it worth for us to build our own platform as opposed to give it to the experts who are doing it for 10 other people? And we've seen that I think the latter works better, at least at the scale at which we are right now. When I have 650 million fans who are willing to make a transaction, then that's a very, very different scale that we're talking about. Again, I mean, something I was talking to Devarshi earlier when we were talking about fans. These teams are over 100 years old. Yeah, IPL's in its 16th year, so it's IPL sort of caught up now to be the second most expensive league in terms of from a per match value perspective, just second only to the NFL. In 16 years, we've managed to get there. So I think there is a lot of catching up to do, and that's why I was talking about the tech stack, etc. So I'd love to have a conversation.
I have one more difference to it. When you said about it is about building yourself or doing it from the third dimension, it's about the collaboration. If you collaborate instead of just looking in build and buy,
I love that.
that will give you.
We got a front of shirt opportunity open. We can discuss this. It's going to cost a few $1 million. I love that. I'm all for collaboration.
If you don't mind, can you just introduce yourself a bit?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
I'm Pradhan. I'm the headhunter in sport, media, and gaming, and we play other. But anyone needs a job. But just going back to the conversation about fan engagement and the entire fan experience. I think going back to the gamification and esports elements of it. When we speak to our clients within esports and gaming, and even fan engagement is so niche that it's just really hard to describe what fan engagement is at the moment. And I think that's where organizations are really struggling with that conversation and what that piece looks like. Take for example, Team Bitcoin, which is an esports team, or Blast Esports, which is an esports rights holder. When they came to us to what will our fan engagement team look like, we build it out. We struggled with it. The truth is, I mean, we're supposed to know these people, but we didn't because they don't exist. So when you're looking at third-party agencies, or you're looking at a suite of what fan engagement journey looks like, we don't know that yet. No one really knows what that looks like, and that's what everyone should figure out. And I think that's where, again, going back to the data point. Yes, data is great, but are we finding the right data? Are we using the right data to storytell what that fan engagement piece looks like? And I think that's the question to you guys. How do you identify those data points in what that journey looks like, and how do you define that fan engagement journey for your teams or for Sky, for example?
I'll tell you what, I've got a confession to make, and probably this is an open question to everybody over here, right? I'm sure, like me, I've been blessed to attend a lot of live sporting action, whether that's football, whether that's cricket, whether that's anything, like a lot of people around in this room. There is a different thrill, and I'll tell you, it just stops with the thrill of seeing the audience or the loud noise and the participation and the overall environment of watching, say, cricket, for example. But everything else, sorry for the language, is shit. Yeah. I'll tell you what, because the moment, imagine going to a loo break in front of 70,000 people, right? Or if you're having food, or unless you're in hospitality, it's a different thing altogether. Or even for the matter, when a 6 is hit, or when a 4 is hit, you can't watch the replay when you're watching it live in stadium. I personally, and I'm not saying it just because I work at Sky, but there's a different perspective when you're watching it live on ultra high definition, right sitting at home, where you can pause it, you can have a tea, you can have friends, you can laugh. You know, this whole watch party that happens, that you can watch it with your friends, colleagues remotely. It's a totally different viewing experience. I'm saying, not discounting the fact that, you know, you get the thrill of the sound and all, but if you want to watch a replay, and you know, blink of an eye, or if you've gone somewhere, you know, 2 wickets have fallen, and you're waiting all day for a wicket to fall, right? So I'm saying that when you think about, you know, the technological advancements that we would be looking at, I think it would be a different world altogether if, I mean, drawing an example of, you know, driverless cars or whatever, I'm sure there would be 5 years, 10 years down the line, you would have a television, or you will have something wherein you feel like you're the umpire watching it in front of, you know, watching cricket. There's a different thrill element, even football for that matter. You know, the different angles or whatever that you don't get to see all of that when you're there in the stadium, you know, looking around or whatever. So, but there's a different thrill in terms of the excitement, but viewing pleasure, I think television gives you the best viewing pleasure, whether it's the Olympics or whether it's anything. So that's my confession. I don't know about you guys. Maybe you think, you know, watching it live is far more exciting, but I think watching it on television is so subscribe to Sky.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about that. Let's be honest.
Let's add to that. I mean, in the last 2 decades, you know, being at a stadium, right? It's probably the experience has been stagnant, right? And essentially, when you talk of everything that's happened on technology, platforms, etc., right? As a fan, and I've potentially been sort of seeing, you know, live sport at stadium for 3.5 decades, but the experience has been very stagnant. I mean, there is Wi-Fi, but nobody can connect to it. You know, low breaks, as you mentioned. Food is like, you know, you could buy like 20 beers for the cost of one that you pay at Oval and so on. So I guess, you know, a question to the panel really is that, you know, where can technology actually improve so is live sport really, you know, a space where technology hasn't been able to really hit home and significantly elevate experience, you know, unlike say television and, you know, say at home sort of platforms?
I think I should be saying this working for Sky, but I think BT Sport Practice. I don't know if you've ever played around with the BT Sport app or Champions League games or any of the games, right? Their app is just brilliant. You can actually zero in on certain players if you want to, and the camera will just follow the player around. You can have a panoramic view if you want to. So they used to do that. I don't know, with Warner Brothers, now it's got TNT Plus and, you know, all that kind of stuff for an identity challenge right now. But I'm saying that they got it right in terms of what the personalization of the content that you're talking about. Because I would like to see different perspectives. For example, you know, I want to see the cricket from a wicket keeper's perspective as to, you know, when he is there, how is he seeing the bowler come in, you know, on the pitch. And those are the kind of things which probably is the next level of evolution where technology, sports right holders, I think Formula One is doing that to an extent where they want to have that kind of, a look and feel, because I know we work closely together at Sky with yourselves, and they're looking at that super fan perspective of what is it that you're aiming for, or what element, or what part of the car you want to be looking at.
And I think the technology side of things is technology is there and it is available, and we've got some spectacular examples that people are trying to do. It's also a question of what can the team owner spend on that is relevant for them. And you mentioned about being at a venue. Venues typically you have 3, 4, maybe 5 flagship events in a year. That's it. Outside of that, vacant, right? So will a venue owner really spend a lot of money in sort of digitization of that particular venue? And what is the return on that and why? And if, let's say, you have one Premier League match, should the Premier League invest in a particular venue, because even if they're going just once in a year? So that is a question of economics, right? But with all these things, the new age organizations are digital native, right? So we have the pleasure of working with a lot of little companies like New York ones, and I had a meeting with the CEO of a surfing, I've not met this gentleman before, comes in, surfer dude, long hair, shorts, Manhattan office, and so these guys started a surfing, let's say, content organization. All they do is surfing, travel, fashion, music, and of course the actual surfing sport as a sport. Now the thing that they zeroed in on was that it's a great backdrop. I mean, lovely ocean in 4K. You cannot beat that, and on any screen. Where people love consuming that. You combine that with the aspirational side of surfing. Not everyone gets to surf. I think people love the idea of surfing, but not everyone can do it. And then they just zeroed in on that, right? So as I said, sport, but travel, fashion, and music from a surfing standpoint. And they had something like 30 to 40 million paying subscribers globally. This is going out of Brazil. And so they were digitally native. So what we find is that it is a question of economics. You usually need an internal champion who will say, look, I'm going to do things differently. And it's a lot of corporate issues. I mean, these organizations are massive. I mean, try to get something, leadership will have far better stories than me on how to get a change done at an organization like Sky or BBC or RTL or ESPN. But the digital native ones, we find that they are great. They'll be like, I want individual feeds, and I'm going to have cameras placed in a way where I can generate 7 different audio tracks from scratch. In fact, for a lot of the sporting formats now, people actually crowdsource commentators, right? So you've got fan commentators. A lot of times for sports, people actually watch different feeds because they've got a super fan in Australia giving commentary which is relevant for the Australian audience, for example, because they're passionate about it. So now they can crowdsource it. So if you are a football fan sitting in Mexico and you want to give Spanish commentary for, let's say, LA Galaxy, you can do it because you can give real-time commentary, and there are people who are earning livelihoods with that. So on one hand, it is great for sport, you're getting more content. On the other hand, people can sort of work in the industry of sport regardless of which country they are. So yes, the technology is definitely there, but with the world of sport and media in general, it's always, and as Alok also put it, right, is it really giving them a better return, right? And when, right? Because a lot of these investments sometimes can take 10 years. And can you really wait 10 years for something tangible to show?
I had a follow-on question, Jeremy, for you, unrelated actually, from a data and analytics perspective, from your, say, playing days, when you played international cricket in 2002 to today, the entire sort of data analytics spectrum has exploded. Do you think the teams of today can actually win games that they would have lost just because they understand data and analyze it better? Or do you think sport is still see the ball hit it kind of very instinctive?
It's a really good question. I think a team of 2023 playing against its rival in 2008 would beat them based on data. But as we know, sport, the tide rises for everyone, and most teams now have got data analytics baked into the back room. So I think one of the things that we've obviously focused a lot on is data analytics, hard science. The bit that I spend most of my time looking at is bringing back the human factors. So again, the sort of emotional side of an individual going into battle, there's not a lot of data that's going to help you with that. The fact I know that Malinga, has a 4 miles an hour slower ball than everybody else is great. But if my knees are clanking together and I can't think straight, that data isn't much use to me in battle. So I still think managing ourselves under pressure is a massive competitive advantage, and the data is marginal. I think we've had a sort of a decade of fitness where we had SAS trainers coming in, or Australian rules fitness coaches coming in and throwing us into, getting the champagne out of the ice bath and throwing us into it. That was the end of my career. And then we had a decade of analytics where the recruitment and the performance analytics was there. And I think the last thing left to measure is inside people's heads. So I think the mindset and the psychological approach is going to be the next decade. And I think that's fascinating from a broadcast perspective, because you can't really, see that. But then also from a, cultural perspective, the thing that links this last discussion together with engagement, what is it? Well, to me, it's shared values, and you feel part of a tribe. Somebody on the Man City side of Manchester wearing blue will feel very different to their mother or father across the dinner table that's wearing red. They believe they're part of different tribes. They believe they share different values. They believe they are a different set of, the community compared to, CSK and Rajasthan, for example, will have a very different view. So I think although data is clearly, a huge area of insight and commercialization, I think a huge area of performance and engagement is storytelling and the authenticity of a brand. So for example, and a lot alluded to this, when I worked with Rajasthan in that first tournament, everything was about Mumbai Indians having Sachin Tendulkar, and he was the highest paid cricketer ever for this 2-month thing. It was about individuals and it was about money. We couldn't compete with that because we were the most efficient team. We had to optimize that. And one way we could do it is through culture. So, for example, we need to create a central narrative for the players flying in from Australia, from Pakistan, from the Caribbean, from South Africa, from England, for the senior Indian players and for the junior Indian players that were looking up at Shane Warne as their icon. They couldn't believe that they were in this team. So how do you create a sense of belonging in a team that never existed before? There's no Man United, black and white photos down the hallway. So we had to create an authentic story. So I started to look at the Rajasthan community. We've got this desert land of really resilient people, almost nomadic people that thrived in adversity. And one of the things that they did to overcome the marauders coming into their villages was they built these incredible fortresses. So Rajasthan's, as many of you will know, has got these incredible fortresses, the pink city of Jaipur. So we had some team building events out in some of the battlements of these incredible fortresses at sunset, peacocks squawking. And we started to pull on the stories where the players in their various geographies had been underdogs, where they'd had to defend their family or defend their sort of honor, because this was a central story that they could all relate to. And we called the home ground Fortress Jaipur. And we wanted to defend those low totals that we were going to get. Obviously, Warney with the groundsman scuffing up the wicket helped us to defend those scores. But we won all 10 of our home games in that first year, and we defended our territory. Now, was that brilliant tactics from Warney? Without a doubt. Was that our analyst producing great insight into the opposition? Without a doubt. But there was something that every one of those players will tell you that bonded and binded them together, and that was a central belief that they were underdogs scrapping together to defend their territory, and that territory was a part of all of our lives, and that was that pitch at Jaipur. So I think as much as we talk about technology and as much as we talk about data, that's the clinical side of business. To me, there's a huge competitive advantage in business and sport for the human emotion and the tribal instincts of galvanizing people together through a transformation to beat the enemy. And that's the bit that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, good.
Hey everyone, my name is Rahul. Hello. I work in HSBC as a head of product. My question to the panel is as a consumer. I'm a big time sports fan, Arsenal, Formula One, cricket, tennis. It's not exactly cheap, is it? So we've spoken a lot about using tech to create experiences, engagements. I've got two questions. First, so let's try and start with. How do you use tech to possibly reduce your operating costs so that my monthly subscription go down, so I can continue to watch sports?
You become friends with him.
And the second question is more on the cultural side, like Jeremy touched upon. I could go to a pub today and watch an Arsenal match with my friends, spend £5 on a beer, and I could walk away with an experience I would never forget, especially if Arsenal wins. So how do you guys, as a company, as a broadcasting company, look at that model? And what are your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, very fair. And I think it is spoken as a true fan. It's not cheap, and it is getting more complicated, right? Because you've got so many different platforms. You have to find out which format is showing on which platform, and then you have to go subscribe to it, and then you have to go remember to unsubscribe and cancel it and all of that. So it is expensive and it is complicated. So I think because sports continues to be so much in demand, the sports rights market has exploded. So people like Sky and others are paying maybe 3 times as much. Not just Sky, I mean ESPN, RTL, I mean all the Fox Latams, and these guys are spending 3 times, 5 times as much what they used to when it comes to sports rights. And then the only way they can recoup that is by charging it or sending it onwards to their subscribers. I think a lot of technology is being used to see how we can reduce the cost of doing this. So previously, people would send hundreds of people to these sporting matches to actually do production. Instead of that, they actually now sit in their own locations and they're able to do production out of their home place. And so, for example, the whole Sky team actually does production string out of Australia in the UK for events that are happening in Australia, parts of Asia, just because the technology has moved that they can get something which is 5,000 miles away, do production, and distribute it globally, all within 200 milliseconds. The technology has moved, and it is helping reduce cost down to sort of at a subscriber level. All of that is not translating into as a consumer. I think what will happen and what will help is the consolidation. This is not feasible for people to go to 6, 7 different platforms just to consume their sport. I mean, so we will, although we have had so proliferation of different platforms, as Deveshi also mentioned, at some stage, maybe people will say, you know what, I'll just go to Sky or I'll just go to an RTL or a Star or whatever it is, and I'll just give them X amount because otherwise I would end up having to subscribe to 6, 7 different platforms. So a lot of this consolidation will sort of take place, hopefully very soon, and that will be sort of in the interest of the fan. Because right now the situation is not really sort of, and also as a super fan, you will not want to sort of do anything otherwise, right? Because you want to sort of benefit from it, you want to benefit from it. But it is, I agree, it is complicated and it is expensive. And it gets, if you're traveling, what do you do? You know, just sort of having to look at ways to sort of consume content that you can.
Thank you for being my guest. That was a very great answer and a very, very true and honest answer. But at the same time, there are 2 more challenges which I wanted to add to it. One is we've got to cater to people like Alok, make sure that he's being well paid, Its players are doing well. From the footballing perspective or the cricket perspective or whatever it is, because it's not us. So it's not as if Sky is pocketing that money and giving it for itself. It's like, you mentioned, it's the cost of acquisition of the rights has increased 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and we have got to keep pace with that. Somebody's got to pay for it, right? So one is that element that we are making the boards of or the sporting institutions richer, not us. And the
Promoting sports is a career.
Yes, we are definitely. So you can be having a wage of £500,000 on a weekly basis if you're a footballer or an Indian cricketer, depending on how you want to look at it. The other element which we have not touched upon is the challenge of piracy. And that's a big thing that even we do face, because even though we are paying over the odds for acquiring rights for certain sporting properties that we believe we should have, but the mushrooming of piracy has also become very, very complicated in terms of, and sophisticated rather, where it's very difficult for us to stop it. So that's why I think with the Premier League rights that is coming up, the renewals, the English Premier League team have decided to focus on piracy, because piracy is nothing but the reason why you're paying X amount is because you've got a huge piracy market. Now if those people were to spread it out, then your cost also would come down significantly. So piracy is again a big factor in the overall thing. And hopefully, like I said, the piracy market is so sophisticated, it's very difficult. That's why you see those watermarks that we are putting across. There used to be people before it was as bad as putting it on Facebook Live and just showing your Sky Sports thing to people. These things shouldn't be done, because that hits everybody where it hurts. Yeah.
So my name is Prashant Bhatia. I'm a content consumer. Sorry. So my question is for 2 different approaches taken by Saudis and Americans. If you look at the Ronaldo's, Messi's, how they have acquired those brands, actually they are brands. They are more than player in now. So they have huge fan followings and they bring different value to the club. If you look at the Ronaldo, they have over 500,000 weekly salary or something crazy like that, whereas Americans have a different approach. Inter Miami has shared their brand and visual rights to Messi, and both has got different values. Now, that adds some cost to the clubs, and that is a different way of monetizing the value, the earnings, and revenue. How do you see those 2 different approaches, and what is your take on those kind of marketing more than just player, but materializing those fan followers? So Inter Miami got 600 fan followers within few weeks or days, and Al Ittihad got something similar.
I mean, it's not very different in the real business world, right? When you're bringing an ace on board, you either offer them a lot of equity or a lot of money upfront. So I think that's the model that they're taking, and something works for someone, and the Saudi guys have a lot of money, and Americans have built businesses on the back of giving equity to the sort of the management teams, to the founding teams, etc. And that's the model that they've followed. There's no right or wrong approach. I think both of them work phenomenally well. So it depends on how deep your pockets are.
And I think this has been going on for a long time. And it started with Real Madrid in all honesty, the way they monetized it, because I don't know if you watched the original Galacticos that used to be at Real Madrid. And there was it's a very interesting thing if you watched the Real Madrid thing, where they had the opportunity of signing Ronaldinho, who was the top Brazilian player. Compare that with Beckham, who wasn't as great as Ronaldinho. But Real Madrid decided to go with Beckham because he had a huge fan following in Asia and the world, and he was far better looking than Ronaldinho. And what they figured out, and Beckham wasn't doing that great in Manchester United anyway. They wanted to throw him out anyways. And he moved into Real Madrid. And the amount of money that Real Madrid generated by just the t-shirt sales of Beckham more than offset any of the fees that Real Madrid ended up paying them. And so this has always been there in history.
But it hasn't worked with PSG. I think that is the same model they approached with, and it did work, right?
PSG was more of a statement by the Qataris that, Qatar needs to be taken seriously as a player and in the global footballing arena. And I think they did a fantastic job with the World Cup that they held in 2022. So that's a different thing altogether. And that's what happens when you've got too many star players that nobody shines. Because it's like, this is the same thing that the England team faced, prima donnas. Everybody thinks that, they are better than the other one. And then you end up being a flop show. And I think PSG learned that the hard way because their only objective was to win the Champions League trophy. And they haven't been able to do that even with all the heavyweights there. And now that entire team has totally gone, So it just, probably you will have better insights.
Yeah, I sit on the, I'm non-exec director of the LMA that looks after the football managers. So I do some of the leadership development there. And I think there's been a big shift in leadership style from the iconic Alex Ferguson that would say basically as soon as anyone gets too big for the team, they chop the head off and they move on, and he retains ultimate control, which was an incredibly successful model in that era. Now, the sort of strapline for that one would be no one's bigger than the team. Well, actually, the icons now in terms of the social media following, they are bigger than the team. And this creates a whole different power dynamic within the environment, within the dressing room. So I think now we've gone from that command and control, the senior leader, the boss can tell everybody what to do because you are a player and nothing else, to have a stakeholder in the business or to have somebody with a huge social media following that's driving revenue behind the team, even if they're not even scoring goals or scoring runs. That's a very different dynamic. So we've seen a shift in leadership that's mirrored across society, that we're much more coaching style, facilitative, empowering, delegating. And that's definitely a trend that we've seen because, managing the maverick, iconic players is a critical part of an elite team. I was very fortunate to do a Q&A with some of the top leaders a few years ago, and Jose Mourinho was on the panel. I asked him about, you seem to have created an incredible rapport with some of the most difficult people to manage, and you almost recruit them into your teams. And he said, well, why wouldn't I want the best team in the world. I want the best players in the world. It's my job to then manage them. Whereas you see a lot of people, perhaps with a bit less confidence, they would recruit in people who are easier to manage, less volatile characters. But, that's a really interesting model that you've got a maverick leader bringing in more mavericks. Maybe it's a difficult cocktail overall, but I think we've definitely seen that shift in leadership towards more empowerment, more development. So the tone of the coach in football now might be saying to the player, to the star player, you might only be here for 4 years. Let me help you to be the best you can possibly be over those 4 years. So your next job, is a much more lucrative one for you in Europe or Saudi or wherever it might be, rather than I'm the boss, get back in your box, do it as I say. And I think that's an interesting power dynamic within talent in teams.
Pep Guardiola is doing that still.
Very well.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Money backing in, yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Shub. I'm currently studying at Queen Elizabeth School in Barnet. And I just had a question addressing the subject of piracy earlier. Now, we always say that piracy obviously is theft, to put it in simple terms. Many people will obviously pirate content if they physically cannot afford the privilege of watching sport. Now, sport has a certain sanctity to it. It's stories that are created that are enjoyed by people from low income, high income equally. If you see football especially, it brings together people from all different backgrounds, different classes, levels. How do we make sport more accessible in a way that we can still monetize it enough to make it profitable and therefore let it grow? But make sure that it's still accessible and viewable and can be engaged by a kind of larger part of the population.
No, I think great point. I think, as you said, sport has always had, for every generation, you have sporting heroes and legends, and also, as Jeremy said, these are motivational anecdotes. They are not just individual, let's say, self-improvement standpoint as well. So there is always sort of a push and pull between how commercialized sports industry becomes in every country. Right? So you've got, and this is where the public broadcasters play a very important role as well. Right? So you've got every country typically will have a public broadcaster, and they will ensure that at least the core, let's say, sporting events are broadcast for free to the masses. And that is something which will continue to sort of take place. And every country has it, right? And I think it's a good mix, because I do think, on one hand, if as a sports person your shelf life is extremely limited, I think people should be able to sort of make the most of it if they are in the world of sport. Why? Because why not? Right? Because we don't want just the platforms making all the profit on it and just sort of keeping that as bottom line. So I think the sort of push and pull between public broadcasters and sort of for-pay broadcasters will sort of ensure that the balance is there.
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, if you were talking about football, we do respect the fact that, if you're a passionate lover of sport and you can't afford to pay for it, doesn't mean that you indulge in piracy. There are ways and means of, watching that content. So for example, as you said, public service broadcaster, you've got Match of the Day. There has been an entire generation, I believe, our age, who couldn't afford Sky subscription when it originally launched in the mid 90s or the late 90s, because the subscription cost was quite expensive. But BBC did show the Match of the Day, where a lot of our senior directors and all have actually grown up watching Match of the Day on BBC. So that is one element. The other element is we've also got certain free-to-air channels, right? So we've got Sky Sports, mixed, where we've got a free-to-air channel where we show different kind of sports on a free-to-air basis, just to drive your engagement. But I don't personally, and I don't think anybody would subscribe to the fact that if you can't afford it, doesn't mean that you just watch it illegally. I mean, there are many things that you can't afford. Doesn't mean that you just walk in and get it. Sorry, I can't afford, but I want it. No civilized society will allow you to get away with it, and nor should they, because that's how you've got to work hard for whatever stuff. And like you said, it's not as if we as a broadcaster are pocketing it. We've also got a free-to-air channel. We've got the public service broadcasters who are showing that kind of stuff. So if you're really passionate about it, you'll be watching it through accessing on those kind of platforms. So we've also got a huge subscriber base. When I say subscriber, it's free on YouTube, right? So you can watch all the goals of whatever happened on the Premier League on Sky Sports YouTube platform that we have. So there are ways and means of you engaging with the sport that you love, but it doesn't have to be live, because I don't think that's fair for that gentleman who's paying for his fee, while somebody says, "Sorry, I can't afford it. I'm going to indulge in piracy." Right? So it's not.
Well, just one extra thought on that, and I get those points, but I think even the free YouTube viewing is actually keeping them in your ecosystem and an engagement strategy. So I think that's relatively self-serving. But what I do think would be a nice thing in the sense of partnership is, which is admirable by the way, and great strategy. But I think coming back to the essence of the question, one thing that I saw last week, a couple of weeks ago, was the England rugby game at Twickenham, where the stadium was about 60% full. And I think there should be some kind of partnership that using some kind of technology, some kind of partners app, where the local community and local schools should be allowed to flood that stadium and get that stadium full of young people who can go and watch a live sporting experience. Okay, it's the tail end of the summer, there's lots of sport on. The game against Fiji wasn't a blockbuster, it turned out not to be a blockbuster for the wrong reason, and the World Cup's coming up. So there's all kinds of reasons why the stadium wasn't full. But with technology these days, we should be able to press a button, somebody within the stadium and say, we've got 10,000 free tickets. They're going first come, first serve to the local schools, one adult per 5 kids or whatever it is. And that stadium should be full, which is great for the broadcasters. They're going to sell a few burgers and a few, beers or whatever to the adults, not the kids. And that should be a good thing. So that's how I think technology can play that rapid partnership. And again, then lots of people on rotation would have free experience. And I think we can all remember the first time we went to see a first live sporting, game of whatever kind. And 20,000 people could have had that 2 Saturdays ago, but instead we're staring at red seats. And I think that's another partnership opportunity missed.
I think the other bit on accessibility, and some of the broadcasters have started to do this quite well, is break down consumption into micro moments. You don't have to subscribe for the whole month. I can just watch one game where I pay $2, or $1. The other way is technology in general has to and will over a period of time get cheaper. That's what has happened to internet. I mean, you look at the cost of broadband services 10 years ago and broadband services, the cost of broadband services today. There's a tremendous sort of penetration of broadband, and it's a lot cheaper, so a lot more people can sort of access that. So that definitely helps. Secondly, if somewhere more brands like Microsoft sort of start investing more in, because someone has to pay for the technology, right? If it's not the user, it has to be a partner who's supporting broadcasters to bring that to your home.
So why do a lot of advertising kind of model?
I have to meet.
We do also a lot of there can be subscription models and advertising models. I mean, you could have a channel which shows ads and the match.
So they do exist. So there's SWOD and there's AWOD, which is subscription-based video on demand, and advertiser.
So once there's an advertising-led model, I'm sure you can give it free to people who want to watch that kind of sport.
So that's where brands come in, where they are really willing to spend money and advertise on content. So yeah,
but still there's a ceiling that advertisers. I mean, the classic example is, I don't know whether either of the companies made money, Disney Star or Reliance Jio Viacom, whatever it is called. Whether they made money in this round of the IPL, looking at the amount of money that they paid towards
Reliance, let's not talk about it because they just don't want to make money. Probably that's another way of looking at it.
This is what I'm saying, but look at the rights at the price that it went for, right? So it just doesn't make financial sense. So even the advertising, how much advertising revenue you'll be able to generate. And those are the things that somebody's got to take a hard call. And when people do, then many people don't like it. As to,
So my other question was about cross-pollinating sport with, say, Hollywood or Bollywood or whatever it is, and can that also be done through tech or something like that, where a larger part of the population gets engaged in sport because of cross-pollinating it with other genres or other streams? I don't know.
I think this is what we were talking about, right? But this Drive to Survive, the Netflix show. I mean, it has got lots more people getting into the world of Formula One. I mean, I know so many people, in myself included, I just can't understand the whole concept of Formula One. All the cars are just going. And, everybody's just going around, it's just a hype. So but when you watch the thing like, Drive to Survive, you get an understanding as to, what exactly is behind the scenes, the passion, how the two drivers, they are part of the same team, but they're actually at each other's biggest rivals, and so on and so forth. So, and that doesn't have any rights issue or rights problem of having a global distribution, right? The reason why, like I said, the first one was House of Cards. when Netflix originally did launch. They launched it across the world. Anybody and everybody could see House of Cards, and that historically has never been the case with any entertainment program where one rights holder had the rights for the global distribution of that particular show, because there hadn't been any particular global player. I mean, you talk about art, even in Europe. I mean, we are there in Germany, Italy, Austria, Switzerland. But Europe has got what, 30 countries or 29 or whatever it is. We are not there across all markets. So you've got Africa, you've got India. It just doesn't make financial sense for one particular person or one particular broadcaster or entertainment company to be having global rights to everything, unless you're like a Netflix or whatever the stuff is, or Amazon Prime. And it's easier said than done, but it's how you can get people to engage with it. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about, when we were talking about technology and all that kind of stuff, when we grew up, or when I grew up, disclosing my age here, but it was very simple. It was an umpire's decision whether it was an LBW or not. But look at the stuff now. You've got Hawkeye, you've got the Edge, and you've got certain camera from this angle, you've got that camera from. These things were not there before, including tennis, where the ball, just a faint line. I was watching the US Open the other day, and it was just Alcaraz's shot. It just hit the faintest of the line, which wouldn't have been caught otherwise, right? So those are the kind of technological improvements that is enhancing sport, broadcast, nail-biting finishes, or taking the right call, and nowadays you've got kids watching football. I mean, I was at the football field with my 7-year-old the other day. Something happened. These kids, they're just 7-year-olds. One gets that, and the other one is like, no, VAR. I was like, where do you get VAR in a small, football thing in Ealing? But this is how the kids are growing up. So this is where, technological advancements can make sure that, an offside is an offside, or whether that goal should be allowed or not.
Yeah. Rishi from HCL. I think I quite like your analogy about the drive to survive. I've got an emerging county cricket player at home. He's 15. Austin, like you. And I think what I'm seeing is the engagement aspect. He follows drive to survive, or he tries to follow emerging cricket players, where they went to study, where will I go to study in university. That whole engagement aspect drives a lot of decisions from a commercial perspective in a family like ours. Like I try to buy the premium channels, or we try to go for these sports events, and you obviously will book hospitality with that. I think that's a new revenue stream from an engagement perspective. It seems to be coming up well. We were recently in Barcelona, so when we went to the stadium, I could see this whole metaverse aspect, or this robo keeper. So all these revenue streams seem to be driving a lot of engagement in all these smaller kids, and I think they kind of influence their parents to spend that money. And I'm thinking if we aggregate it at a fan or fanatic level, I think that leads to new revenue streams which are slightly uncharted in my mind.
So can we have a camera on top of the mascot going out to shake hands and do the anthems and whatever with one of your Royals games, Kumar Sangakkara shaking the mascot's hand, and his son is sitting at home with space age VR goggles on and is having that first hand experience for £3.99? £4? £5 holding the man. He wants it for free.
Just one thing. We put in all this, so probably to sort of take a question together and answer. Okay? Yeah, okay, good. Anshul?
Hi everyone, I think it's okay to stand and talk, right? Probably shorter ones, pretty visible. So my name is Anshul, I'm from HCL. My name is Anshul, I'm from HCL. I must start with saying that every time there's been a reference of Manchester United, I must say that my chest was swollen and it swelled with pride, because in all humility, I must say that it was my team which actually did it. I was part of that team of delivering that whole fan engagement, digital platform, and the digital transformation at large. And a lot of fan engagement conversations happen today, And I was thinking, each of these conversations could be a long conversation in itself. Whether we should do a build or a buy, what kind of collaboration could happen, how should we make money out of it, right? But, whether it is how does the sports tech and monetization converge. But I think I must say that having engaged with Manchester United, my team, from the very early stages, it was, I think I must reference to, somebody also said that, fan engagement, nobody's kind of cracked yet. Rightfully so, because fan engagement isn't a standardized commodity which is available out there and we can pick it up and kind of implement it. And it's about identifying who are my fans, what are my personas, who am I actually generating these experiences for. It also brings in the context of accessibility, affordability. There are certain fans who will be fell off enough to pay, and there will be certain fan personas who would not be able to pay, and therefore there is a certain variation in terms of how we identify and execute that persona. All of which was part of our conversations by virtue of actually getting involved very early on. And the final result of it, I think, is all in front of you, right? From the number of global fans from 659 million to 1 billion, without quoting numbers, the sponsorship revenues being 3x, merchandising revenues going a certain X percentage, value, which I think has been not mentioned as much, about how much of value of various stakeholders got created in the process, whether it was sponsors, whether it was partners, whether it was relationship managers, whether it was players, whether it was fans, whether it was affiliates. The idea was to identify all those personas, realize where does the value angle come in for each of those personas, and to design for that and execute it. There's another angle which has not been spoken about.
Sorry, if you don't mind, what's your question? You make a statement. Sorry, you just got to start time.
Yeah, but don't worry, 30 seconds and I'll finish. There's another angle which is probably not been spoken about, which is making the money out of this whole experience is predominantly upon the sporting organization of the available assets they have, which also means that how do I generate an ecosystem of revenue generation and realization. My affiliates partners, somebody also spoke about the value chain I could traverse of the player, of the other named, assets or individuals, and then try and make money out of. For example, if Jeremy, what kind of music does he like? So I could actually have a music partner, right? What kind of flower does Jeremy like? So the female fans could identify what kind of flowers. So a florist drives the revenue, a taxi company drives the revenue, a venue ecosystem player drives the revenue, etc. So I think each of these things, when thought through enough and executed as part of your personal journeys, has a significant potential to generate revenue. And on the cost side, there's a certain level of cost transformation which could be done of bringing the value chain of whether it's the ticketing or it's the venue management, etc., to identify whether how much of that part's going to be insourced and how much of that part's going to be outsourced, etc., etc. So there's several, we've done that, which is why I'm speaking from experience.
If that's the question, my answer is the Spice Girls and Red Roses.
Hi, my name is Gurvinder. I'm from Tata Group or Tata Click, an online company in India. So I have two questions. One is, see, football in this country, it's a very part of the fabric of the community. It runs over throughout the year. There's a lot of community angle to it. People meet and there's a support system building in the back. But in cricket in India and IPL specifically, it looks like a very capitalist take on it, right? In 2 months, it's a carnival, you're out with it, you don't care. And I'm also speaking this from the point of view that Tata Group also is very deeply rooted in community in India as a business owner. So the question to you, Alok, that well, I know you are not representing BCCI, but as teams, what are teams doing to build the community angle of it, which is more sustained? Otherwise, it looks very transactional, and everything is business and done with it. That's first question. And the second question is, I think broadcasters here perhaps need to drive more on the innovation front, especially when, to the point that Dhaval also made, that on the bundling aspects of it, right? Because again, Tata Sky, which was a JV in India, which is now Tata Play, we saw a beautiful case study which is doing very well, which is they bundle all the apps in one place, and there is a reduced bundle price, and that makes sense, right? Because obviously I can't keep paying for all the apps, and then the quality of service also is so compromised. So, and this only industry sort of broadcasters or champions of industry can drive it, nobody else can. There it was perhaps also driven because players like Netflix were struggling with very little ARPU, etc. But unless somebody like Sky drives it, and then only benefits is passed to the consumer. So I don't know how quickly or what all can be done to expedite it. So those are the two questions actually.
Okay, next.
I'm Tamek. I'm a neuroscience student at the University of Bristol. I'm also a keen cricketer who's looking to make a career in the game. We talked a lot about the consumer today, and this is just more from an athlete's point of view, mostly Jeremy's area. Is there a future for virtual reality in mental health and performance training for athletes?
Okay. Who else? Do you have any more questions?
Any more questions? I have one.
Yes.
My name is Anand Kumar. My name is Anand Kumar, and I'm also unfortunately come from the banking industry. So my question to you, Jeremy, or my observation, that you mentioned about Alex Ferguson's time when the leadership style was quite different. If anybody's has become too big, probably the door was shown to you. Nowadays, you know that what Saudi Arabia has done it, and so do you feel that this kind of the price which has been given to the different players will impact the team or will impact the game as such? Because I feel that, in my view, this is going to impact very differently and negatively the team and the game, because the huge money and very few countries or very few sort of organization can afford to pay that much.
Thanks. Anybody else? Yes.
You have to remember so many questions.
Hi, I'm Sakshi. I'm currently working for Deliver. So I have a question for Rajasthan Royals. I know you guys have the women's cricket team. So I also come from the Jaipur. So,
We don't have a women's cricket team.
So like you support the women's cricket
So
team?
we run a women's tournament in Rajasthan. Just started today.
I think in Jaipur. So
Yeah.
So basically, I just have a question. Like, is there any way for the tech, as me being the sports person, that it can be provided to the rural areas that even the women can also play like men do, like in the fields? So like there is not much of the there is no future for the women like that much if I compare to the males in the Rajasthan, as we come from the conservative families. So is there any way like the tech can be cheaper for the rural areas to spread the word so that even the women can also join the sports?
I'm actually going to combine your question and another question here, which was on the community bit. If I may, there are no other questions.
One last.
Yes.
I'll make it very short and sweet, I promise. I think it was clear from the panel today that there is a bit of it's quite cost prohibitive to procure licenses for or IPL, viewing rights, right? And I think that's a common problem across the board. When we started watching English Premier League back in the 90s, I don't know how expensive was it to procure rights for EPL, but the fact that we started watching it is why we've embraced the football game so very well in India. And a lot of us, we talked about Manchester United, Arsenal. I'm a Liverpool fan myself. We haven't watched as many Bengal or Mohun Bagan games, if you ask me, right? Because that's the power of broadcasting rights. So is there any sort of discussion or reasonable discussion that any of you have had with BCCI about the whole thing of making IPL more pervasive and more acceptable across the globe? Just curious to know that.
And the last one. Yes.
I just have one more question. We spoke earlier about games and gamification. I think one quite good example of that is F1 with the F1 game, F1 Manager, F1 Arcade is downstairs as well. So how replicable is that with other sports? I'm looking at more cricket, FIFA. I mean, football is FIFA. Say with cricket, with rugby, with many other sports. Can we use the power of games to again bring it to a wider audience?
And you start over.
Yeah, so I think on the question on the community piece and giving especially access to girls. So I'll go back to the point where I started, where our mission is to sort of really use cricket to transform the society. And going back to that point, what are we doing outside of the 2 months of the IPL, and how are we sort of engaging the community? So back in 2006, 2007, even before the IPL sort of came into being, the owners of Rajasthan Royals had created a talent hunt called Cricket Star, where there were people from across the country, about 30,000 men from across the country had participated. And there was one guy who sort of won the talent hunt, who ended up moving to the UK actually, playing for a county team, settled here. The guy who came second actually ended up playing cricket, who continues to play cricket till date in the Legends League. That thing we revived last year, and we created a reality show called Cricket Ka Ticket, which is in English translates the ticket to cricket. And for the first time ever, we created this show in a format. We worked with Viacom as our partners, so the show came on Colors TV and JioCinema. So we created an 8-episodic reality show, but the way we went around the operations for it is, in order to make it accessible, we partnered with one of the players called Crick Heroes in India, who's got about 15-odd million semi-pro and amateur sort of cricketers on it. And about 100,000 boys and girls from across the country uploaded their videos of their batting, their bowling. And we had a team of coaches behind who sort of evaluated all of that. And a small group, a few thousands, who actually called for on-ground trials across 6-7 different cities across the country, so that we ensured that there was a good representation across the country. And then a group of 22 people were then taken to our academy in Nagpur, where for 3 weeks they went through training, coaching, master classes from the likes of Mary Com to ace cricketers who came and sort of spoke about their journeys, spoke about batting, bowling, fielding, etc. And the two winners that emerged, incidentally, the girl who won is from Jaipur, and the guy who won actually quit his banking career. Actually quit his banking career at the age of 30. Started training with us, in the IPL. There was a team of net bowlers that was created. And that guy actually is right now playing for a county team here in the UK. And the girl and the guy who were sort of selected, and the next three in the row as well, have been sort of given a commitment for a year-long mentorship by the Rajasthan Royals Academy and the coaching ecosystem. So that's where sort of we are investing in community outside. And while all of this was done, and some of you guys who are sort of in the business of content would understand that it's kind of like not the drive to survive, because these are not real players, but this was created into an 8-episodic reality show, taking you through the journeys, their backstories. Some of these guys came from absolute rural places where they didn't have access to anything. And they sort of made it to these trials, and now they are on television. I mean, that show is being viewed by over 25-30 million people across those platforms. So that's one thing. Apart from that, we've invested a lot in academies. So we've got one academy which we run in Nagpur. We are working on academies with the Rajasthan Cricket Association, the Assam Cricket Association. We've got 2 academies in UK, one in the Middle East. We're working on building academies in South Africa and the Caribbean islands where we have teams. So that's one way sort of where we are looking at investing back in the community. This is on the player front. Even on the management side, a few years ago, the Rajasthan Royals launched the Royal School of Business, understanding that there's a dearth of management talent. So courses and programs on understanding stadium operations, so that our friend here has a great experience when he goes to the stadium. Stadium operations to sponsorships, to everything that you don't see on field with the folks behind the scenes. What does it take to sort of run a sports team? So that kind of covers the, again, value chain of the stakeholder. The next bit that we are going to be working on is going to be a coaching certification program. How do we get more and more coaches into the ecosystem so more and more people can be made into elite players? So that's what we are doing round the year when we are not sort of spending those 2 months playing the IPL. And in order for us to be ready for those 2 months, we have to work 4 or 5 months in advance, getting everything set and ready so that everyone can enjoy a great game. I hope that helps.
Then you want to get the neuroscience and these many questions.
Neuroscience and money. To finish off, neuroscience and simulation. Yeah, we're always simulating in our minds, as you know. We are visualizing and catastrophizing how fast the bowler might be, how scary the audience for tonight might be before we sit down. So we're used to simulation. So it makes a lot of sense to be able to use technology, virtual reality, to simulate the context of the game so that we can manage our emotions. So I know one of the Premier League football teams has done a lot of work in what they call the Mind Lab, where they've actually taken players back into the context of a penalty shootout or a mistake they've made on the pitch, and they visualize that again, and they talk through what their emotions were like at the particular time, and they're helping them to process the trauma, if you like, of the stress, so that when they come into their next performance, they're calmer. So managing ourselves in a hostile and uncertain, situation, pre-rehearsal, visualization, what-if scenarios, even coming into a room before a speech and sort of walking around and rehearsing, that's all part of great preparation. So if we can do that before we get into the pitch or the speaking room where you're going to be, that's a massive advantage. And I think technology, at the moment, it's a little bit like stick figures, and you sort of swing your bat in your own lounge and knock off your mum's vase, and it all ends up in, tears. But I think when we think about this immersive kind of environment we could create with technology, the next advances, I think it'd be incredible for mental health as well. Coming back to the banking question about money and sport, are we creating sort of demons by paying people too much? I think, for me as a county cricketer in 2008, to go from playing in front of a crowd like this at Leicester to go and coach the IPL and see that people getting paid $1 million for 6 weeks work was transformational, real step change. Supply and demand, there's only a very few people in the world for a very short period of their life that they can deliver that explosive skill and talent. So supreme talent in any industry is always going to attract the top dollar. What we've seen in Premier League soccer is this huge engine here in the UK that's potentially going to disrupt now from the Saudi investments. What we're seeing with the Saudi investments is that they're generally players at the back end of their career that are going to go and play, in the same way that the UK rugby players have been going to France and then potentially Japan, almost as the finishing school for their careers, which I would say is an amazing life experience to go and live in the south of France and then in Tokyo. Incredible for an athlete. Also maximising that short window of opportunity. I guess, the commercial model could break at some stage. We know that Premier League football teams, many of them are running at a loss to afford those salaries. So that's not a sustainable model. Even, we might need the blend of Hollywood of Ryan Reynolds coming in and the superstars to prop that up, which is an interesting development. But I think what my hope would be, how many Ferraris or how many houses in the sun can one footballer be miserable in, would be the question. So I think at some point, I would like to think that we start to see these iconic players actually create their own foundations, which aren't just there as tax, opportunities. They're actually there to create a community, to give back to society, because all those millions and millions of pounds could inspire so many people. Back to your question, boys and girls, in rural communities could be really helped by that. And, yes, the Ronaldo going to a local district and inspiring people, on a particular day could be transformational for those people's lives to touch that player. But I think, again, coming back to the theme of today's show, technology's got a huge role to play. You know, this ability to create a digital community, very low cost, with an iconic superstar as your mentor for life. I think the character and the community that sports can build and can teach our young people, you know, at a time when we've never been so isolated and fragmented and polarized, which technology can also do, we've got an opportunity through sport to galvanize, to inspire and embrace and teach some incredible life lessons. And that's my hope, that if we are going to pay superstars to earn loads of money, that they actually develop this purpose-driven community around them that inspires people for generations, you know, and many years to come.
Good. Thank you. But before I really officially end the session, a quick parting note from each one of you. Quick one-liner.
Right. I mean, it's been a pleasure to speak and sort of discuss. I think the world of sports and media we're still at the beginning, day zero of what is yet to come.
Thank you.
Data's great. Humans even better.
Thanks, Jeremy.
I think the future is bright with the convergence of sport, technology, media coming together, because what you think is impossible will suddenly become possible, and you wouldn't even know what you did. So,
thank you. Hello.
Enjoy the drinks, guys.
Well, thank you. Thanks to each one of you being here. Before I really sort of sign off, a couple of quick things. The next Tech Tuesday is happening on the 3rd of October. The topic is digital identity. We've got speakers or panel experts from Secura, from GSMA, and we also have one person who was earlier the Chief Scientific Advisor to the UK government, and he's also the one who set up NWC, Mobile World Congress, Dr. Mike Short. So if you are interested, if you know your friends, family, acquaintances, even enemies are willing to attend, please let them know. Most welcome. And this will be followed by a topic of generative AI in the month of November. Please let us know. We are there across LinkedIn and other social media. You can see that. And last but not the least, please share the good words. Once again, please write a post on LinkedIn. Let people know there's an event called Tech Tuesdays happening, which is support we can only grow. And the fact that we are growing with your love is evident. Last month, we have 52. Today, we're sitting at 63 number of guests. So thanks to each one of you being here. Enjoy the drinks. And we'll obviously invite some of you for the video bites outside, so don't run away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Yes. Yes, please.
Just end streaming. End streaming. All right, bye. Take care. Take care. Bye bye.